Hi guys, so Science Sunday, start doing this once a week, deliver some useful scientific information for you. So I'm starting with a paper review today of one of my personal favourites, which was written in 2006, titled The Physiology of the World Record Holder for the Women's Marathon, written by Andy Jones, who's world-renowned physiologist and researcher slash nutritionist as well. So as you can see in the figure, this is taken from the paper and its average race pace and contributing factors. So we've got from anaerobic contribution to rate of energy aerobic expenditure, into VO2 kinetics, the rate at which we can utilise oxygen consumption in the muscle. But the factors I'm going to focus on today, just because this is quite a big paper and I'm going to condense it, is VO2 max and running economy specifically. So we'll discuss how those two can interplay into your training and performance. What is VO2 max? VO2 max is the maximal oxygen uptake that we can produce during exercise. So this is a capacity value. What athletes tend to have the highest VO2 max? Out of any running athletes, it usually is around the 5,000 metre athletes that have the highest. And this is probably because they race at 93 to 98% roughly of their VO2 max on average. So they're constantly training and racing at that maximal output. Although 800 and 1500 metre runners run quicker, obviously, because it's a shorter time frame, they tend to have lower VO2 max values than 5k athletes because they have a greater reliance on anaerobic energy contribution. And this is the same but inversely proportional for the marathon runners who, you know, you'd expect them to be the fittest guys on the planet, but they actually also have lower VO2 max values compared to 5k runners. Again, this is just because the longer the intensity there are other factors that become relatively more important to success in those races. In terms of running economy, this is defined as the oxygen cost in millilitres per kilo of minute of running at a certain speed, or the oxygen cost of running at a certain distance in mils per kilo per kilometre. And this is probably the most common value used. So an important note on measuring economy, how to measure it, it needs to be measured at submaximal intensity. So in other words, below the lactate threshold. And this is to avoid the VO2 slow component, which occurs when we hit the heavy domain, interfering with our readings. So once we go above lactate threshold, our VO2 will slowly rise to accommodate the increase in workload until we kind of become fatigued. In terms of measuring running economy, so for an elite athlete at 16 kilometers an hour, which is 6-minute miling pace, which for most of us is pretty good, a value of around 200 mils per kilo per kilometer is considered average. Values above 200 is poor, and values below is getting there, is pretty good. So practically measuring running economy, how do we do it? Well, we do this in our lab, and this is the protocol that actually we use, that he recommends in this paper. 3-minute stages, 1% incline on the treadmill to account for not being outdoors. And then you use a progressive 1 kilometre increase in speed at every stage. And you're aiming to get probably around or slightly more than 4 submaximal stages in if possible to give you an accurate measure of running economy. So what's the relationship of both between running economy and VO2 max? Why is it important to know both? Because VO2 max itself, while it's a capacity value and it is a good indicator of fitness, it does not discriminate between athletes and their success if they have the same VO2. So two athletes with a VO2 of 70 mils per kilo per minute, one could win by a minute and the other one could flag behind, but the VO2 max value itself won't tell you why that is. And we can kind of show this in this figure here, and this is a good example because it shows that whilst we've got two athletes here with a VO2 max of 70 mils per kilo per minute, very highly trained people, the triangle athlete, we'll call him, athlete triangle, uses less oxygen at a submaximal speed. You can see this, okay? So there's less oxygen being used at each stage. And over time, when they're getting towards this VO2 max value, he actually gives himself a 1 kilometre an hour advantage over the square athlete who has the same capacity but is just less efficient. So this is why it's important to know the running economy and VO2 max in your athlete. So why use both together? Well, measuring both means it's possible to calculate the speed associated with VO2 max, which is known as SVO2. And a case study, we could say an athlete with a VO2 max of 65 mils per kilo per minute, so very well trained, running economy of 200 mils per kilo per minute, so nicely kind of economical, quite efficient. their SVO2 max would be at 19.5 kilometers an hour, and this is worked out through this equation, 65 times 60 divided by running economy. And why is this important to know? Because we can actually use it for training purposes. So if you can calculate your SVO2, then we can use this like speed or value to kind of periodize and calculate good intensity zone running if we want to try and work on this VO2 value. And this is the value again, the reference, sorry. So like I said, I'll try and do one of these a week, just under 6 minutes. I won't put them any longer than that. So hopefully you found that information useful. Don't be scared to slide into my DMs if you have any other questions.